Hi, this is Rodrigo from Frame Freak Studio, and this is the Creative Hostrak Show. Today we have a special invited. Her name is Julia Quandt. She's from Brazil, but also has worked a lot into the character designer industry and illustration, and we found her work through the CTNX event last year. So welcome, Julia.
Thanks for having me.
So, to begin, can you tell us a little bit about your history, how you got started? Was something that you were doing since you were a kid or something like that?
I like to say that I picked up a pencil when I was 2 years old and I've never put it down. I've definitely been drawing for as long as I can remember. It was always a hobby and something that I did instinctively. In terms of actual formal art training, that didn't come until later. I did have family members who are in the animation industry, and they gave me books and resources that I could learn from. But I didn't actually take a real art class until high school, when I became president of the art club. After that, I decided to go into college for animation. So I went to Woodbury University, which was local to me, and I was attracted to that school because of their emphasis on traditional pencil and paper animation, which I think is really valuable to have, not necessarily in the sense that it's used widely by the industry, but in the sense that if you can feel your drawings, I think that makes animation that much stronger.
Nice. And I've seen your art, and it's like really cute in the beginning. And also, I see that you use a lot of elements from the history in Latin America in order to make your art. What made you choose to go this way? Because even in Latin America, I don't see many artists who are trying to do this.
Mm-hmm. I was born in the United States to Brazilian parents, but we moved back to Brazil when I was very little. And when I was a kid, I was really strongly like American. Like I felt like that was my identity. So even though I grew up in Brazil, I felt kind of disconnected from the country I was living in. After I moved back to the United States, I started feeling the other way around. All of a sudden, you know, this culture that I thought was mine was actually really different from what I grew up experiencing. And so I became more interested in learning more about Brazil and just getting to know the culture that I grew up in. So I researched a lot of things about mythology and about history, and it became one of my passions. Once I got into college and we started doing projects and we were supposed to be picking themes to work from, I tried to think of what is something that's unique to me? What's something that only I can express and I can tell? And I'm the only person in the class who knows anything about Brazil, so why not? And so I decided to incorporate this knowledge that I had into my work.
Great. Also, can you tell us a little bit more about the Woodbury University? In Latin America, as you may know, like there are not many universities dedicated for art. Like, for example, in my country, the closest thing to illustration or animation or something like that is graphic design, which is not quite the same. So there is a lot of speculation I see in Latin America that about art school and what it will look like. And sometimes it's obvious that their idea is not like based on reality, but other times maybe they are closer to that. How was your experience in the university itself?
It's a similar situation in Brazil, that when I was a kid and I decided, hey, I want to go into animation, everybody told me, you can't do that in Brazil. You have to go to the United States. There's nowhere else where you can study, where you can learn something like this. It's impossible. So that became my goal, and I went to school abroad, but now I'm really happy to see that there are new animation schools that are popping up in Latin America. There's new movies and shorts and really creative projects that are coming out of there. Even though it's still very much a baby industry at the moment. It's growing up pretty quickly, and so I'm excited to see that. But as for the school that I did go to, Woodbury, it's located in Burbank, California, and I actually ended up in Burbank more or less coincidentally. My mom got offered a job in Los Angeles, and she was like, "Hey, let's go to Los Angeles." Like, oh, sure, you know, it's next to the animation industry. Of course, I'm going. So I ended up there, and it turns out that there's this local school. I went to their on-campus fair, and I learned about the animation program, and I really liked that they put a lot of emphasis on 2D animation, learning the basics on paper. There's different courses that you can take. So if you want to go into stop motion, you can do that. If you want to go into CG, you can do that. But everybody has their bases covered. I also appreciated that it's a small school. All the classes are really small. My graduating class was 14 people. And many of my classes only had about 4 students in them. So you get a lot of attention from all of your teachers, and I really appreciate that.
Great. Also, how has been your experience in trying to enter the creative world? Because even though Burbank is like the heart of everything where all these opportunities are happening, it's still, I think, a little bit hard. There is quite some competition, and now that there is internet, like there are many people who are looking from all over the world to these opportunities here. How has been your experience in the middle of all that?
It's definitely competitive. It's complicated. You have to put in a lot of work into it. And sometimes it comes down to who you know or just being lucky. Like I said, it was a coincidence that I ended up in Burbank. But I think that the internet is definitely opening up a lot of opportunities for people. I've met so many incredible people just from posting things online. I've had opportunities to learn more things than I've been able to learn in school. So tutorials online, getting to meet new mentors and things like that. And to break into the industry, you kind of need every advantage you can get, really. So I think keeping an open mind and seeking out these resources and strengthening yourself is the best thing that I've been able to do.
Nice. Also, we found your work through the book that they gave us in CTNX. It was our first time over that event, so we were a little bit overwhelmed. I wanted to ask you first, were you at the event? And second, if you are going to that event on a consistently basis, what would be your advice for people to make out the most of those events?
I've actually been going to CTNX since the very first one in 2009. Back then I was actually still in high school, and like I said, I was the president of my high school art club. So my teacher, our advisor, came up to us and was like, we have this special scholarship for 2 students from a high school to go to this event, and I ended up being the one who was picked for that. So I got to go for free. I got to meet so many people, and because it was the first year, it was kind of small. There weren't that many panels, but it was still a wonderful opportunity, you know, collecting business cards from people and things like that. But I've been going every year since then, sometimes through my school, sometimes paying on my own. It's definitely expensive, so you have to really consider what kind of resources you have to be able to go there. But I think it's absolutely worth it, because you get to expose yourself not only to all the different artists who are there, but also panels that talk about industry or craftsmanship things that you might not be able to access otherwise. So it's always been a very positive experience for me. That last event that you've seen my work at was actually the first event in which I had a table of my own. So I was actually sitting there and displaying my work at my table. And that was also a wonderful experience because everybody got to see what I had to show.
That's amazing. I see that there are many people who tell me that if they rock this event, like pretty much their whole year is done. they already got like all the opportunities they need, all the work they need, and of course all the money that they need to support themselves for that year until the next event. Uh, have you seen that happening to you by having the table, or or is something that happens when you have like the business skills developed?
I would certainly say that it helped to have a table there, because otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you right now. You sort of have to know what you're doing, really. It's not the kind of event that you can just show up to and expect everything to go okay. Like, I had many years to learn how to manage a table because sometimes I was volunteering. I think it's really important to prepare a portfolio ahead of time, even if you don't think anybody's going to look at it. Sometimes you're just chatting with someone and they're like, hey, can I see your work? And you're like, oh, sorry, I left it at home. I don't have it. So you do have to be prepared for anything. And you do kind of have to put yourself out there. If you like somebody's work, just go up to them and compliment them. Like, even if that doesn't go anywhere, it's a good idea to foster those connections.
Nice. Also, on your experience with the university, what was something I wanted to ask you a two-part question. What is something that you expected that became true out of that experience? And what is something that you didn't expect it at all and happened and you think it was important?
Ooh, that is a pretty heavy question. I went into this school expecting to have a pretty good idea of what a studio work might be like, because Woodbury in the junior and senior years sort of sets up the studio environment where students can work with each other to produce a film. I thought that that was a valuable experience to have. I know that not everybody wants to go to school or can afford to go to school, but I think that being able to work with your peers on a one-on-one is really important to not only strengthen your own artistic skills, but also your ability to work with other people. So that was really important to me, and I definitely got out a lot out of that. Something unexpected. I definitely got exposed to a lot of things that I wasn't sure I was going to outside of the field of animation. So, for example, I actually got a minor in psychology because we had to take at least one psychology class. The reasoning that the department said was so that you can understand characters and storytelling better, you got to understand how people think. So I took the psychology class and I was like, you know what? I might as well just keep taking them. So I took enough classes to give myself a minor in psychology, which was not my intention when I went in, but I think it'll only strengthen my ability to create characters in the future.
Nice. Awesome. On the other side, there is this thing that I see a lot happening. I created two businesses right now. My first one was on a tech side, which developing websites and apps and things like that. And what I discovered there is that while many people were like really technical, it was like really easy to communicate with each other because they were all geeks in the industry.
Yes.
However, on the creative industry, I see another tendency now that we are into the animation studio and all that, and which is that there is a lot of creatives who have amazing talent, and they are really shy. And this idea of
Yes.
going to the event is like really intimidating. Like even sending emails or contacting other people is like really intimidating.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you if you have been through that yourself, or if you know people who have gone through that, and if so, how did they overcome it, and what would be your advice to overcome that shyness?
I definitely went through that. I used to be incredibly shy. I barely talked to anyone. You had to be a pretty close friend to be able to have a conversation with me. But I think it definitely helped to be in an environment where a lot of people liked the same things. So, you know, being in animation class with other animation students, you find a film in common that you like. You find a TV show in common that you like. Even something outside of animation, like video games or books, definitely helps to break the ice to be able to talk to people, because you're all sharing the same passion. You all like art or storytelling or something that binds you together. So trying to find those commonalities definitely helps to smooth things out. It is just at a certain point, if you feel like you're holding yourself back, you kind of just have to, you know, work through it and relax a little bit. And I know that that sounds so easy to say and hard to do, and it really, really is hard to do. But you have to acknowledge that that's something that you need to work on, and you can't just hide away from the world forever. If you want to be out there, you have to talk to people and try finding something that you have in common to be able to do that.
Great. Also, there is this topic that I find, especially going into professional industry of art. Uh, there is a huge difference when you're doing art as a hobby because you're doing what you love, whatever. But then when you want to become a professional in it and pretty much live from the art, you have to learn the business side, even if you want to be a freelancer, direct employee, and the business side of things, like the skill of business, becomes really
Yes.
important for. And I've heard this from all the people who have made it like really big. Like it wasn't. They also had like a really good set of business skills that they developed. Uh, how did you go about developing these skills?
A lot of it was learning on my own from resources that I found online, or just people who have been in the industry longer who are able to give me advice on that topic. Woodbury did actually have a requirement for a business minor along with the animation major because they valued that and they thought that was important. But that requirement was removed because they wouldn't be able to get accreditation if they did that. Which I don't entirely understand the process behind that, but they still encouraged students to try and diversify their classes and learn about these things on their own. And they always emphasize that it's not just about your art and your skill, it's also how well you can market yourself and how well you can network and how well you can understand contracts and business situations that you might not know anything about if you only study art. So even though the requirement has been removed from that major, I did put in the effort to try and learn as much as I could from as many resources as I could.
Great. Yeah, because this is a very difficult thing since from my experience, like becoming an artist and a really talented one, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort.
Yes.
But on the other side, like the business skills also takes a lot of time and takes a lot of effort, which can be clashing with each other. And I truly believe that if you focus completely on the art, and I see many of the people doing this, like they just want to become better artists, like people perfecting their portfolios through years and years and years, and I'm like, just go show your portfolio. And, no, it's not perfect yet, and they keep doing it. And on the other side, like I can get where that comes from, but at the same time, if you do not get like real feedback from business and the people who make the decision, then you can be working on the wrong thing for a long time. Have you seen people doing this as well?
Yeah, I definitely have seen a lot of that, and skill is definitely extremely important, but so is knowing how to work in a group, to interact with others, to seek out the best opportunities, to pursue them, to learn how to write resumes and job applications is also very important, and just to survive once you're actually in the working world. I know that a lot of people who do art as a hobby, they decide not to go into it as a job precisely because they don't want to have to deal with that. But I think that a good way to practice those skills is to try doing an independent project of some sort, like gather together a bunch of friends and say, hey, let's do a little comic book or something like that, or a magazine, and see just how well you can market yourself if you're able to do that. It doesn't even have to be an actual print thing, but marketing yourself online is already a really important skill.
Definitely. Also, I've seen this tendency in the last years where, and pretty much through the interviews as well, everybody is telling me to focus on the history that our art tells and on the connection. And especially since I think that marketers and companies have gone too extreme on this side of trying to have formulas for histories and things like that, and everything is becoming common. I've been seeing like series and movies and things like that who have been coming from a place where if you see the art, it's not great. So, for example, if you see the first version of Rick and Morty, the art sucks completely. It sucks. But the history was so great that even when they made it a series, like the art obviously is better than the original product, but it still sucks. But the series is like a complete success. And there is even in Japan who were like really close to this idea of the art having being important and the quality being important. There is series like Psycho Mo 100 and One Punch Man. When if you see the art of the original artist, like it's bad. Like I was able to do much better art when I was in 8th grade than this guy, but the history was so great that he was able to make it into the professional world. And I've been seeing this trend where people art is not like the best in the world. Like if you see Adventure Time as well, the original pilot, the art is bad as well, and then you see the great success of the series. How do you think it plays that, or better say yet, like, do you think this is going to become like a real good trend in the future, where the even if your art is not like the best in the world, like you can get into, if your history is good enough, you can get big?
My philosophy is that there's no such thing as bad art. There's just art that doesn't communicate what you want it to say. So if you have that clarity of communication, if you know this is the emotion that I want to express, this is the story that I want to express, this is my character, this is my theme, if you are able to put in enough work and enough skill to communicate those meanings, that's what makes the art good. Even if you could look at it and say, that's not very skillful, or that's kind of sloppy looking, but it makes you feel something, it makes you think about something, I think that's good art. So I think that there definitely should be an emphasis on understanding what your art means, understanding what your story means, and saying, is this what I want people to know when they see my art? Is this what, are they going to understand it? So making our art understandable to me is the most important thing.
Right. Also, on the on a similar topic, there is a lot of artists who close themselves to this idea of perfecting their art. Obviously, it is important, but I think it's a job that will never end. Like we could be 90 years old and we will still be perfecting our art. But at the same time, like if you see like the classics that we have grown up, like the Flintstones, Dexter Laboratory, the Powerpuff Girls, like obviously the art was like, even the finished product, like you see, oh, okay, this is really simple, right? What will be your message for those people who are too perfectionist, and it will be better for them like to try to get the feedback on what they are doing and just get it out there?
I am an incredibly perfectionist person. once I get going on something, I can't really stop unless it's as good as I can possibly make it. But I have learned some ways to not hold myself up to that standard on every single thing that I do. One of those things is gesture drawings or just sketches where you don't even pay too much attention to what you're doing. Just take your pencil and scribble. Make yourself not think about how perfect it looks and more about how you feel when you're drawing it, or the energy that you're putting into it. Because a lot of the times you can't really the energy that you want if you're a perfectionist about it. You hammer away at it for so long that it gets rid of all those little imperfections that make it interesting. One of the things that I really like in the art world is stuff like folk art, or art that's sort of accidental or not really all that skilled, because all of those little imperfections, they show the humanity of it. They show that a real person actually touched this work and made it happen. So I think that those imperfections also tell a story, and to not get too hung up on them because they're also important.
So I wanted to ask, what made you choose to be a character designer?
It's one of those things that I just seem to be naturally inclined towards. I love coming up with new characters. I love thinking about what they look like. When I'm out on the street and I see somebody who looks really interesting, I'm like, wow, that would make a great character. Keep a mental note of it. I like collecting fashion photos and looking at pictures of dresses and suits and all sorts of different things that people can wear, because they're all an expression of who that person is. So it's just something that I ended up with because it was my interest, because I think that everybody's interesting, and I think being able to communicate what's special about them is really important.
Nice. Also, what made you choose to do 2D art instead of 3D in this world where everybody's trying to be like a 3D artist?
Life would be much easier if I were a 3D artist. I'm just not very good at it, and I know that if you practice more, you can get better at it. But the reason why I don't really want to do that is just it feels like there's a barrier between myself and my art. When it's just me and my pencil and my paper, it's like the ideas are flowing straight through me and into my drawing. But every time I've tried to do something in CG, in like Maya or something like that, I feel like the tools are getting in the way of what I want to express. And I have taken CG classes, and I've had some experience with that, but it just wasn't expressing who I was. It wasn't feeling like this is art. It was more like feeling like this is a tool and I need to learn how to use it. So I think theoretically speaking, I could get a job in CG. I could work with it, but it wouldn't be true to what my strengths and my nature is like.
Also, I understand where you're coming from, because this is pretty much the same that we felt. But recently I had an experience doing art in virtual reality, and like that feeling that you just described it about the tools getting in your way, that wasn't there. Like you just pretty much were inside the world and creating whatever you wanted, and it was in 3D. How do you think this is going to impact in the future the creative industry?
Honestly, I am really intrigued by this idea. I haven't had the opportunity to do so myself. I've never done virtual reality art, but I do think that it would be an incredibly valuable tool for people to be able to use. Well, I do mostly 2D hand-drawn animation work. I've always been highly interested by stop motion animation and like sculpting and things like that. So being able to feel that in my hand is also really important. If there's a way to replicate that in a virtual 3D environment, that would go a long way to helping sort of analog people like me to be able to succeed in the digital world.
Great. Also, this is something that I like to ask everybody, although I know this is like a big of complex question. When you see people trying to enter the creative world, the illustration world, and all that, what are the most common mistakes that you see that they are doing, but they do not are aware that they are doing it?
I'm not sure this is a mistake so much as something that people are sort of conditioned to do, but putting down your own work when you're presenting it to someone. So like you show someone your art, but then you're like, oh, it's not very good. Yeah, I know I'm not the greatest, but can you look at it? And it doesn't bother me personally, but I know that a lot of people are like, if you don't trust your art, then why should I trust your art? So just be aware that that is a really important barrier towards showcasing your art. And I used to do that myself because I was always taught that you shouldn't show too much pride because that's like being stuck up. You know, you're not acknowledging your imperfection as a human being. You know, you shouldn't be conceited. But presenting your work in a way that shows confidence is not the same thing as being conceited. If you don't want to like talk yourself up, that's fine, but don't talk yourself down. That's a really big mistake.
Definitely agree. I found this lesson from one of my friends who pretty much puts as an example of Tony Stark in Iron Man. Like, he's like, you could think that he's a little bit conceited, like he's a little bit arrogant, but at the same time, you don't see him like treating others like, oh, you're just peasants or something like that. So the way he put it was like, if you're going to take pride in that you're the best and you're going to act like you're the best, since by the same principle that we are all the same, then that means that everybody is the best and you treat them as such.
Yes.
So that's the way he balanced it. Also, what would be your advice for people who want to get into the industry as a professional? But again, they are beginners and they still have experience to gain. What would be your advice for them?
I think my advice is something that's not necessarily limited to the animation industry, but definitely helps, is diversify your interests and your knowledge base. Try and learn as much about the world as possible, because once you're in animation, you're going to need to know so much. You're going to need to know about characters. You're going to need to know about stories. You're going to need to know about how the audience receives your work. You're going to need to know about what statements you're making about the world that your story takes place in. You're going to need to know lots of technical skills. You might not need to do them necessarily in your work, but knowing how they work will help you along the line to be able to present something that is useful to the other people who are also in your department. I think it's really important to try and access as many resources as possible. I used to go to the library a lot. The library is a great resource. Go there and see if they have any books on animation, see if they have any books on filmmaking, or even just art in general. Art history is a really important thing to know. In short, I think the important thing is to be inquisitive, knowledgeable, and if you don't know something, try and find somebody who does and ask them for help.
Great, definitely big advice. Also, let me see. If people want to find you online, where would be the best place to do so?
Right now, I have a portfolio website which is juliaquandt.daportfolio.com. But I also have a Tumblr sketch account and an Instagram where I also post sketches, and a Twitter. And all three of them are Quandt, Quandt Universe. That's the same username for all of them.
Great. Crossing up, I have two questions. One is a little bit hard. Well, really hard. This is like for a challenge question that I like to do to all the people. And it goes like this. If you wake up tomorrow and you're in a whole different universe, nobody knows you, but you have all your skills and all your knowledge, and you have $500 in your pocket, what will you do to get to the point that you are as fast as possible?
Boy, that's a very, very hard question. Gosh, what would I do? Well, I would say that I already have a pretty good knowledge base and skill base, so I probably don't have to waste too much time with that. But I would definitely try to get myself somewhere where I would be able to make connections that would lead me somewhere close to where I am today. So probably go somewhere where there's lots of artists that I can talk to.
Nice. Also, is there any advice or any lesson that you would like to share that we haven't talked in this interview?
Sometimes crazy things outside of your control happen. Sometimes a personal disaster happens and you feel like you've been set back to square one. And this could be anything. This could be a financial problem, a health problem, a family problem. All of these things are gonna make you feel like your life up until this point has been cut short, like you've been derailed completely. And these things have happened to me in my life too. And it sucks, and you might feel like there's no way forward, but sometimes there's alternate paths, and it's difficult to find them, but it's not like everything is over. So try to live your life with an open mind so that you can find these alternatives when they happen.
Great. One last question. What do you see your in the future for yourself? What do you want to do next in the next months, years?
I actually would like to open an animation studio in Brazil. Right now, I'm focusing, because I still live in Los Angeles, I want to get a feel for the industry here to understand how everything works. But sometime in the future, I do want to go back to Brazil, and I want to open a studio there, because I think that there are so many phenomenally talented artists in Brazil and in the rest of Latin America, but especially in Brazil, who just have no opportunities. They weren't able to do the same thing that I did. I was lucky that I am an American citizen and I was able to come here and work here. But in the future, I want to see Brazilian stories, Brazilian artists, Brazilian mythology, a point of view that you don't get to see from Hollywood necessarily, because I think these stories deserve to be told.
Awesome. I interviewed a concept design studio in Brazil called Limetown. They focus more on video games, but definitely I'm going to send you the link to the interview we did, so maybe you can contact them and see what comes up from that.
All right, awesome, thanks.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for giving us a little bit of your time and for being into this interview and lending us your knowledge. It has been an amazing experience.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this has been the interview with Julia Quandt. If you like this video, please click the like button in the YouTube video below, and also share this interview with your friends. Until next time.